This here is a top-of-the-line Intel gaming PC built with our blood, sweat, and tears. Except really just our sweat, because the assembly went flawlessly. Our room is just still hot. It's got an Ultra 9 285K, 64 gigs of RAM, 4 terabytes of storage, and a 5090. Granted, the choice of Intel is questionable, but we assure you there is a reason. The Gigabyte motherboard and 5090 have a couple quirks and gimmicks that we'll go over. And of course, you'll get all the performance numbers for this build, which we have dubbed Virgil. And we'll have a comparison to our previous 9800X3D Clarence. You may see something a little out of the ordinary on the graphics card, so let's start there. Yes, there is a traditional 120mm fan sitting on the 5090, specifically a Gigabyte Aorus Master. There are two different reasons the Billion Bytelers give for the fan's existence. The first option is to simply strengthen heat dissipation and improve overall cooling efficiency, which are just filler words you can say about basically any fan in existence, and it only keeps the card 0 to 1 degrees cooler. Or the second option is to help cool the other gimmicky feature of this card, a 1.75-inch LCD screen. The tiny display has a boatload of customization with the ability to show custom images, animations, or text, a few preset animations, and it's able to display various information from the graphics card, including temperature, usage, power draw, frame rate, and more. And if you aren't a fan of having screens everywhere, you can simply turn it off and it will legitimately disappear. When we were assembling the PC, we didn't even realize the screen existed until we powered it on. There were a couple things that we found to be a little disappointing about a card this pricey. The most egregious being a firmware update from around April, which has since been fixed, that ranged from not affecting anything to bricking the whole GPU. Some people also got hit by a middle ground where the card was fine, but its screen got bricked, and the fan just doesn't feel fleshed out. It just looks like a basic ARGB fan when they could have made it a lot more custom or interesting. It just plugs into the motherboard like any other regular chassis fan, meaning there's no way to link the RPM to the GPU temperature. It just goes off of the motherboard sensors. And depending on the case you're using, it could obstruct airflow going from the front to the back. And the fan doesn't actually screw in. There's just some weird rubber nibs, but we'll go over more of that later. For now, I want to talk about the rest of the parts. Say what you will about NZXT, but there's no denying that they make nice products. And this H9 Flow chassis is the perfect example. It was a breeze to build in, there's plenty of room with the dual chamber design, and it has loads of pass-throughs for the cables, with the main opening for the 24-pin and USB cables having an optional cover beside their connectors on the motherboard, so there's no gaping hole if you're using a back connecting one. There's also 6 built-in Velcro straps to secure all your wires in the back so they don't flop around on you, and for the coolest part of Virgil, the fans. The H9 Flow supports up to 10 fans and comes with 4 pre-installed. The rear fan is 120mm, but the 3 at the front are 140mm for even more flow. The top and bottom of the case also take 140mm fans, but we only had 120s lying around, so we're using a set of ID cooling fans for the bottom 3 and a matching ID cooling FX360 INF AIO for the top 3 slots. And let me tell you, this AIO is a beast. With incredible cooling performance rated to handle up to 350 watt TDP, great looks thanks to the PWM RGB fans. If you are familiar, PWM stands for pulse width modulation, which is just a method of controlling the speed of the fans that allows for easier adjustment and the capability to operate at slower speeds for quieter operation. All of that to say they aren't cutting corners with super cheap fans. The only downside is the fans don't come pre-installed, so it may take a couple minutes, but for only $70, it's hard to complain. And while you may not trust such a low-cost AIO, we paired it with an Ultra 9 285K and was able to maintain a cool 55 degrees under gaming loads. Now, I know you're all questioning why we went with Intel, but hear me out. The graphics card was a part of a bundle that was a great deal and came with a matching Aorus Master motherboard, and we can't exactly put a 9800X3D in a Z890. We'll go over the performance later, but here's a quick spec overview. The 285K has 24 cores, 8 of which are performance cores, and the other 16 are efficiency cores. The P cores clock it up to 5.7 GHz, and the E cores can go up to 4.6. The chip has a TDP of 125 watts with a power limit of 250 watts. You probably won't ever see it slurp up quite that much juice. That's really only under brutal multi-core workloads. So while gaming, you'll rarely see it break into the triple digits. As for the Z890 Aorus Master, it's about the most expensive but still reasonable motherboard before you get into the $1,000 godlike realm, and it has a bunch of bells and whistles, including but not limited to easy latches everywhere, big as hell heatsinks for the VRMs and main SSD, metal reinforced insertion points all over the place, upgraded audio chip and DAC for cleaner and more more precise sound, and an HDMI on the board itself for any interior case displays. Surprisingly, there's no HDMI on the rear I/O. The only display out you get is through two Thunderbolt 4s, which both support DisplayPort. And while the lack of any traditional video ports shouldn't cause any issues, because let's face it, if you're building a PC with a $500 motherboard and still trying to use integrated graphics, we need to talk. Nevertheless, it does still feel a bit wrong. A nice upside to getting rid of the HDMI is there's more room for USBs. You get 12 USB Type A's, 6 of which are USB 3.2 Gen 2, 4 are 3.2 Gen 1, and the last 2 are good old 2.0. To round out the rear panel, we've got the easy Wi-Fi plug, SPDIF and 3.5mm audio out, 3.5mm mic in, and finally clear CMOS and Q flash buttons. If that somehow isn't enough USBs though, don't get your jorts in a knot, because there are 2 more USB 2.0 and another 2 more 3.2 headers on the motherboard. And if that still isn't enough, just get a USB hub or a PCIe expansion card. The case has room for it after all. Just don't use up all the lanes, because we do still need 4 PCIe 4 lanes for the 4TB Western Digital SN850X to be exact. And yes, we're using a Gen 4 SSD because going to a Gen 5 drive is about another $100, and if you get a nice Gen 4 like we did, it'll already be so fast that there's no practical difference for gaming. Plus, they can be more stable and generate way less heat than a Gen 5. One other little thing that comes with the motherboard is their DDR wind blade, which is just a little fan that has a leg that you can mount via one of the motherboard screws to blow air directly on the RAM. Well, that would probably be very useful if you're overclocking and taking advantage of the motherboard supporting up to 9,500 mega transfers, especially on an open air test bench. We didn't install it because we just have 64 gigs of regular ordinary run-of-the-mill DDR5 6000 RAM, and thermals aren't really an issue for us in this situation. We can also pretty confidently say that in our case, it would not provide any meaningful changes for the better, and actually may make it worse as it tries to blow air down, fighting both physics and every other fan in this case. And the last piece of this puzzle, the 80 Plus Gold Cybernetics Platinum Certified Fully Modular ATX 3.1 and PCIe 5.1 ready Montech Century 2 1200 watt power supply with Japanese capacitors. Try saying that 5 times faster. Also got Smart Zero fan mode and a 10-year warranty. This triangle maxing box provides great looks and solid value. It gets an A rating on the new PSU tier list and is quite a bit cheaper than other options at only $130. Sure, you don't get RGB or anything like that, but it doesn't really matter because it will more than likely be tucked away in your case, never to be seen again regardless. And depending on how you look at things, having a well-built, reliable power supply to juice up your components is infinitely more important than aesthetics. Now, let's jump right in and see what those juiced up components cranked out for us. All at 4K ultra native, Monster Hunter Wilds put out an average of 91 FPS with 65.1% and 43.1% lows. Horizon Forbidden West got 140 FPS average, and Counter-Strike 2 got an insane 319. Per usual, we put it through our standard game suite at all ultra settings at 4K native, 4K with quality upscaling, and 1440p native, which put out 144, 186, and 197 FPS averages respectfully. And as promised, we'll compare this to our previous build video featuring Clarence, which also had a 5090 but was running a Ryzen 9800 X3D. First, we ran 4 synthetic benchmarks, which we'll show on the screen. Virgil's 285K had massively better multi-core performance, specifically in Cinebench with an 81% higher score, which is as it should be. After all, 24 cores versus 8 isn't really a fair fight. And from that perspective, the 9800 X3D actually held up quite well. In gaming, the turns tabled. In 4K Ultra Native, they trade blows with the 285K winning in Wukong with 67 FPS compared to the 9800 X3D's 65 FPS. However, in more CPU-intensive games like Far Cry 6 actually showed the 285K start to bottleneck the performance even at 4K, but still get a perfectly respectable 161 FPS, whereas the 9800 gets 185. The best examples are Monster Hunter Wilds, F124, Indiana Jones, and Hogwarts Legacy, all of which the 285K wins at 4K and then loses to the 9800 X3D when swapped at 1440. The total averages for the 19 games we tested at 4K are Virgil plus his 285K with 144 and Clarence with his 9800 X3D at 150 for a 4% win. And at 1440, the gap widened with Virgil, putting out 197 FPS and Clarence getting 221. winning by 12%. So the 285K does bottleneck the 5090, but it doesn't come into effect until 120 FPS or more. Now, we did have some concerns about the airflow, specifically the fan on top of the GPU, both questioning how much it helps and, more importantly, if it hurts. There are two main qualms. First is if our extra graphics fan actually impedes air going through at high GPU loads because it doesn't sync with the rest of the fans on the 5090. This means that it just listens to the motherboard's temperature recording rather than what the GPU is saying. So there's potential for it to be spinning slowly alongside the other case fans while the integrated 5090 ones are going at 3000 RPM. Number two is if the fan will create a wall of air redirecting the gust from the front of the case straight out of the top, effectively starving the left side of that sweet, sweet cool wind. We also tested how much the fan helps thermals under load by running a stress test in Furmark and seeing how long it took to reach certain temps. We'll show all the results on the screen, but essentially what we found is it does make it take slightly longer for the GPU to heat up, but only by a matter of seconds, and it doesn't really have anything to offer with consistent loads. The settings for the 3 built-in fans make much more of a difference. Another thing about the fan is the mounting. As we said at the beginning, there's no screws, just a funky rubber gasket with some floppy bits for you to insert in the fan holes, which may help with potential vibration, but makes it so anyone who wants to mount the card vertically will be fanless. Not that that specifically would really be a problem. And while this is by no means a budget build, that doesn't stop us from spending the money wisely, and we can confidently say the ID Cooling AIO, T-Force RAM, and Montech power supply all do an amazing job and are pretty great deals. As for the Aorus Master 5090, you could swap it out for any other 5090, just go for whichever one has your preferred looks. Unless, of course, you want an onboard display, because this is the only one we could find with a screen built in. The only thing we would really change for this build is the processor, and by extension, the motherboard. If you use CPU-dependent programs and want Intel, by all means, go for it. Those extra cores aren't doing nothing in a lot of programs. But if you're mainly just gaming, the 9800X3D will give you more bang for your buck. And as for a Mambo to go with it, you have a few options. If you want to keep all the quick latches, including the ones for the secondary SSDs heatsinks, then you could go for the X870 Aorus Elite. Otherwise, you can get something like the X870 MSI Tomahawk or the Asus TUF. And there's no need to get the E versions unless you plan on using an SSD in the Gen 4 slot and a Gen 4 PCIe expansion card. The Aorus Master is as beefy as any 5090. The fan on top seemingly does nothing meaningful, which is good news for all you vertical mounters, and the screen is fun to have. The H9 Flow was super easy to build in and looks super sleek too, and the ID Cooling FX360 offers insane value and can be paired with just about any chip you want, including the 285K, which performed really well, but again, we would recommend a Ryzen X3D chip if you're just gaming to avoid any bottlenecking. One thing you'll miss out on if you do go with AMD though is the Z890 Aorus Master motherboard supporting 9500 megatransfers RAM. So if you're trying to overclock the heck out of your memory, keep this in mind. Don't forget to get a quality power supply either, and this Montech Century 2 definitely fits that bill. You can't really beat the bangs to buck ratio. And we know it's a little divisive, but here at the office, we think the black and white work well together. But of course, to each their own, and while you can't own this specific PC, as we already gave it away on our Twitch, you can head over there and see what's happening, as we always have some sort of PC giveaway running. As of the time of filming, it's currently 2. We have a Razer Blade 18 with an RTX 5090 in it. You can check our review of that right up here, or the RX 9060 XT PC that we built on a live stream, which again, you can also check out right up there. We have 2. There's a grand prize, and then there's the secondary prize. So if you come headed over to our Twitch, twitch.tv/UFDtech, you might get a chance to win something. Not this PC, but who knows? We might have another 5090 gaming PC coming out sometime soon.